Hey, party people, we are back with settlement patterns and survey methods. So, we're going to be taking a look at the different ways that land is divided and split up and organized. So, we need to be able to identify different rural settlement patterns and methods of surveying rural settlements. So, we do see a difference between rural settlement and urban settlement. We'll get to that in a later unit. For today, we're going to be looking at specific agricultural practices and how they shape different rural land use patterns. How these patterns are classified as either cluster, dispersed, or linear, and the different methods that are included in how to make sense and organize the space. So for rural survey methods, this is just a way of defining boundaries. A lot of this has to do with land ownership. So some of these are a little bit more modern than others. If we look at this first one, Mets and Bounds, this began in Great Britain and then eventually diffused over to North America. And if you look at this photo here, this is an image, like an aerial satellite photo of what it looks like to use Mets and Bounds system. They use landmarks and physical features to establish boundary lines. So because of that, we do see a lot of irregular shaped plots of land, irregular sizes. So like in this image here, for instance, you'll have an imaginary line going from like a barn to a tree or from one landmark to another landmark. And that's how they decide to establish various boundaries. Then we also have the long lot method of surveying land. So this began in France and Spain and then eventually also diffused to North America. And these are long strips of land as pictured here, right? You can definitely see that huge difference between Mets and Bounds and long lot. So typically they're meant to give access either to things like rivers or lakes or sometimes transportation. So in order for, let's say, all the farmers to be able to benefit from this source of water and use irrigation for their farm, they'll start with a plot of land, with the river or lake, and have that narrow strip move outward from that body of water. It's also the same idea with transportation networks. So let's say there's a main road, then the farms will be on narrow plots off of that main road, so that way everybody has access to that transportation. So this is meant to be able to access resources like water or transportation like highways or even railroad lines. Finally, we have township and range. This is more of a grid system, right? It looks a lot more orderly maybe than the Mets and Bounds. So this was pioneered by Thomas Jefferson, and it uses rectangles and this idea of a grid system. So each township is 6 by 6 miles, obviously made in the United States, right? Using miles. It is meant to keep track of land sales and purchases and utilize a uniform survey method. So it was meant to keep things more orderly and organized in a way that is a little bit more straightforward. So in terms of how these patterns are classified, first, we have clustered, and we see this most commonly throughout European history. So we had rural residents living in groups of homes clustered around like this, right? And surrounding that cluster of towns, let me scoot this way, there we go. Surrounding that cluster of towns would be the farmland or the pastures that would be used for agriculture. And there was definitely a sense of community, of resource sharing with clustered methods and clustered communities like this. And farmers and their families would live in the township and then have to walk to the farmland. So this is usually goes hand in hand with Mets and Bounds survey methods. We also have dispersed. So this idea that these farming settlements are kind of isolated, meaning that there's not much around them beside maybe their own farm, and then dispersed over a large area of land. One example that we see this with was during westward expansion during U.S. history. And the U.S. government was trying to convince people to move out west and develop it. And the deal was that they would get about 160 acres of land for free as long as they live on that land and farm it and make it productive. So that whole idea is definitely reflective and supports this notion of individual values and also the idea of ownership of land, as opposed to more of a communal idea surrounding land and resources. And this goes hand in hand with township and range survey methods as well. Then we have linear. So this settlement is organized along some sort of line. So usually a transportation system is where we see this, or maybe like a river or possibly a coastline. And this also goes hand in hand with long lot survey methods. So notice that all of these classifications lend to the physical and geographic layout of these different categories, right? So let me let me scoot over here. What is the point? The why of the where. So in terms of why and where these various types of survey methods exist and have come to be, have surrounded these ideas of the impact on the cultural landscape, as well as this idea of sequent occupancy. Depending on what was there before, other cultures and people will come in and continue to maybe use some of those elements, but also make some of their own changes and make their own marks. So again, this is the objective and essential learning. So